Jay here for Stretford Paddock. That's Joe Smith. And this is a little look at a man called Julian Nagelsmann, who is in contention to be the next Manchester United manager. He's a manager that you've spoken about quite a lot on the channel. Others have as well. We all know we love Michael Carrick. We all know that Luis Enrique is the flavour of the month with a lot of people. But Nagelsmann does seem to be someone who, a lot of credible sources say, is in contention and isn't the worst bet for the next Manchester United manager. So we thought we'd have a look at him, tell us a little bit about him, find out what his record is like, how he likes to play football, the pros, the cons, what your thoughts are as well. I know you know a little bit more about him than I do. Well, you know a lot more about him than I do. And want you guys to get involved in the chat and the comments and let us know what you think. Joseph, first of all, how are we?
I'm good. Yeah, very good. Like I said, this isn't a we're here to endorse Julian Nagelsmann, but it's trying to get a base understanding of what he is, what we can expect from him if he is to be the United manager, and even just so we've got a bit of a more well-rounded opinion of him when United are looking at these different candidates. Who do we like? Why do we like him? And obviously Nagelsmann is a big name and one that seems to be of interest for United, so it's worth looking into.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Before we go into pros and cons and all the rest of it, let's get a little bit of background.
Okay.
What can you tell us about Julian Nagelsmann? Because obviously quite a young coach, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's been around, he was coaching in his 20s. And he's obviously been around Germany. He's now the German national manager. But what can you tell us about him sort of from his origin story?
Like I said, his origin story isn't hugely massive because he's 38. So there isn't a 20-year career to
his origin story, it started 2 years ago.
It's not like a Jose or a Van Gaal or one of these guys who you're looking at 20 plus years of experience. He was a player, but basically quit at the age of 20 because of injuries.
Right.
So he was a high level player, but he wasn't someone that ever made it really at the top level because of those injuries. He was coaching from basically as soon as he retired. So he was coaching from his early 20s. He started out in Hoffenheim as his main kind of head coaching job, 2016. When he came in, they were 17th in the league. There's only 18 in the Bundesliga. I think 7 points adrift as well in the relegation zone, and ended up keeping him up. He ended up taking him into the Champions League as well in the season, I believe 2 seasons later. So someone that took a really struggling team and took them right up the table, into Champions League places. And then in 2019, he moved to RB Leipzig, which I think is where a lot of United fans became aware of him. That was originally where I became aware of him because we played them in the Champions League group stages under Solskjaer. We won the home leg 5-0.
Was that the Marcus hat-trick?
Rashford came off the bench and scored a hat-trick. And then horrendously, the second leg or the away leg, United needed a draw to go through and to qualify, and we ended up losing 3-2. It was a very late goal that we conceded over there in Germany. I think a lot of people remember his very sort of wacky suit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he's a little bit quirky.
So that's
going to me off a bit. I mean, I know he was young. I used to, live in my 3 stripes when I was younger.
Yeah.
But we've all done that. I just don't want the word wacky or quirky or zany.
A real character.
Yeah, I don't want that being associated with 2 things at United, my goalkeeper or my manager.
We'll talk about that a little bit later because we'll talk about the fit at Man United and not the outfit, but how he fits and any concerns there. And then after that, he went to Bayern Munich where he won the league in his first season and got sacked midway through his second season. They were 1 point off top and they were still, I believe, in the Champions League quarterfinals when he got sacked. So a very... I don't want to say unfairly sacked, but it was quite a harsh sacking. He had a 71% win rate as well. And I think only, Ancelotti, Pep Guardiola and Hansi Flick have got a better win rate than that in the Bundesliga. So kind of an odd sacking, you would have to say. He won, like I said, he won a couple of Super Cups as well, which is their sort of Charity Shield variant, which, who cares? But never had chance to win that second Bundesliga is the key point.
How do you assess that at Bayern Munich then, Joe? Because that is very confusing to me. Because he won the Bundesliga, but it's at Bayern.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they usually win it.
Yeah.
But he still won it, so you can't dismiss it. He got sacked, which if someone's getting sacked for footballing reasons, then that's never a good sign. But then that win rate is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's Bayern Munich who are a little bit insane and political with certain decisions. How do you assess that? I know it's
really hard to. And it's really hard to. And as someone that isn't a Bayern fan and just looking at it from the outside, it felt as though Bayern Munich knew that they were coming to the end of a generation a little bit.
Right, okay.
And a lot of those big names, or sort of basically all of those big names that had carried them through the previous decade had gone, other than Thomas Muller. He's the last sort of remaining vestige of the Lahms, the Schweinsteigers, the Boatengs, all that lot had all gone sort of up until and just after COVID. And then basically it was, how do we move on now? Lewandowski had left as well, I believe, and they were playing Choupo-Moting up front for a lot of games.
Yeah.
They were, they had a few, I think they had Sadio Mane there, they had Musiala coming through, Kimmich was obviously established by then, but they were kind of, no Lewandowski, but Kane isn't here yet. We haven't replaced Lahm, really. We haven't replaced Schweinsteiger. We haven't really replaced Boateng and these sorts of players. So they were kind of a team that had almost in transition, despite the fact they were winning the league every year, which proved itself wasn't the season after he left when they didn't even win the league. But it was getting more and more difficult almost each season to win the league. It was less and less convincing. But when you look back at the team they had, for me, I know it's only a couple of years ago, it's not like time has retold this story. But I think that was a Bayern team where when your best players are Serge Gnabry, who is a good player, but we know he's not a world-class player. When he's one of your sort of key attacking talents. We've got Choupo-Moting starting 30 games for you across the season.
He's linked United, wasn't he, at one point?
He was, yeah, and he's just an absolutely bang average player. I think it was going to be hard to get much more out of that team than Nagelsmann did. So I don't really knock him down for that. And I think, like I said, history, what little history it's been, has looked back quite kindly on his time at Bayern. Because, as we know, Tuchel barely won the league that season when he took over and then didn't win the league the season after with them. So they were sort of coming to an end, I think, as a kind of winning the league every season. Then obviously, they've sort of reshaped things a little bit recently. Then obviously he goes over to the German national team in 2023, was the manager there for the Euros where they lost in the quarterfinal to Spain, eventual winners. England lost him as well, obviously. But as we always say, much like when someone's managing Bayern, how do you rank it? How do you rate it? How do you rate international football? It doesn't seem to have any correlation whatsoever to, club management. It's good teams win, bad teams win. If you've got a good crop of players, it's your trophy. If you haven't, you haven't. No one would say Didier Deschamps is one of the best managers of all time, or even Vicente Del Bosque, who did have some good club career stuff, isn't a sort of iconic greatest manager of all time category. He's not a Sir Alex Ferguson or a Jose or a Pep, and yet he's one of the greatest international managers of all time. So I don't know how to judge that. Personally, it's almost like he's just paused his reputation from the day he left Bayern. Obviously, if you were horrendous at Germany, that will go against you. But getting to a quarter-final, losing to a very good Spain team, that doesn't really tell me anything, does it, you?
No, not at all, because I don't think this is a Germany team where you go, this is easily the best team in the world.
No.
When I was a kid, Germany did have that. You looked at the German team and went, this is just a machine that's built to win. And then they've been in this sort of weird era, haven't they, Germany, where they haven't quite been as good as previous years. Was it 2018, the last one, the World Cup, was it? Not 2018. 2014, sorry.
2014, yeah.
So it's been a little while since they've had that level of success. The time when England beat them in the Euros, of course, people looked at that Germany team and went, wasn't great.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it is a bit of a weird situation. And as you're sort of talking about Nagelsmann, it's becoming harder and harder to know what any of this means.
Yeah, there is a bit of that.
His achievements at Hoffenheim, very good, very young. Turning it around there, they're looking at staring relegation in the face, and he gets them out of it. What does that mean for Manchester United 10 years later, whatever it is? Yeah. Not a lot, if we're being honest. What he did at Leipzig, yes, very young. Again, some good things, getting them through to the last stage of the Champions League. Getting battered by United might sort of put people off and makes me think, a little bit. But again, how much can you look into that? Because Leipzig obviously didn't have the resources that even United did have, and yet they did better than we did in that competition.
Got to the semi-final and the quarter-final as well.
Exactly.
Under him,
Exactly. So you can't dismiss that completely. Goes to Bayern Munich, wins a title, but it's at Bayern Munich. You're expected to.
Yeah.
Still got to win it, but you're expected to. Then get sacked without doing a lot wrong. So, and then you go to the German national team and Joachim Low. Is he a great manager? Would you have him at United?
No,
and yeah, he's had success with Germany. Do you know what I mean?
With them,
yeah, so it's very, very confusing to me. So let's talk tactics.
Yeah, that's something that we can be a little bit more
let's talk about what you expect Manchester United side to look like with Julian Nagelsmann at the wheel. So we'll go back slightly to his time at Hoffenheim.
Yeah.
How did he sell? What sort of tactics did he employ there?
Even though there are differences and changes, there is a sort of through line that sort of characterises him as a manager. What you would call a modern coach, so he's very tactically driven. That's the first sort of big bullet point there. I don't know if you saw much of that interview with Gareth Bale on Stick to Football, where he's talking about Zidane and Ancelotti. Zidane in particular, the tactical sessions would be 15 minutes, and it's, go out there and enjoy yourselves, basically.
That's why, for me, Zidane, sorry to interrupt you there, why I don't think anyone ever has, thinks Zidane would work at United.
No.
Because when you've got a group of players that, if you go to tell Bale and Benzema and Ronaldo or whoever, just go out there and just do your business.
Yeah.
Great. If you're saying that to United when they're up against City or Arsenal or Liverpool, it ain't going to work.
No,
you need a bit more than that.
And he is basically the opposite of that.
Yeah.
He's very tactically driven. He's one of those, like I said, if you've got your two categories, he's your modern, writing stuff down, checking the footage, revisiting things, tactical. So that's just the first sort of overarching pillar. He's in this category when it comes to the managers. Within that, it is a lot of the things you would expect from a sort of stereotypically German coach. It's really heavy pressing, the gegenpress stuff. I know that word has sort of come to mean failure after, Ralf Rangnick's time at United, but in and of itself, it's not an issue. He's quite flexible tactically and sort of positionally. So at the start at Hoffenheim, is another phrase that people aren't going to like. He did play 3 at the back. But then since then, he's changed things. When he was at Leipzig, as we know, when we played him, he plays a 4 at the back, a sort of 4-2-3-1, with where he likes his fullbacks to sort of hold the shape out wide, and again, you're not like this. Almost uses 2 sort of inside number 10s as his.
You're getting right. All the worst bits. You're gonna say in a minute he likes buying wingers from Ajax for 80 million quid.
Yeah,
you're gonna start telling me things like that, because this is like the worst bits of Ralf Rangnick, the worst bits of Ruben Amorim, or the things that didn't quite work out for them at Manchester United, and this is what he's about. I know it's a completely different scenario. Obviously, it worked for him.
What I will say is there are similarities to Ruben Amorim, and I want to get to that, and I also want to get to why I think that could be a good thing. Not because I'm a big Ruben Amorim fan, even though I think I backed him and thought he should stay to the end of the season. It's not because I like Amorim that I think it could work. It's a consistency of vision thing that I think is important.
Okay.
But just on him as a player. So but crucially, differences to Amorim, he's very adaptable with his system. Yeah. He's someone that does change things depending on his squad. So each time he's gone into a new team, he has changed it. He's got his overall principles where he likes to bring in this really heavy pressing system, and he likes to have the sort of free flowing football in the final third, and his wing backs and all that sort of stuff, or full backs that like to push up. But he isn't someone that won't change formation no matter what, and he does adapt to the team that's in front of him, which is crucially the thing that probably did cost Amorim his job in the end, was that lack of flexibility. So he's not going to do it because someone else tells him to, which is what Amorim was trying to avoid, but he'll do it because he sees it himself.
Okay.
It's not an outside pressure thing. He will analyse the situation and play that way. And again, the similar thing at Bayern, 4-2-3-1. He likes this sort of double pivot in there. He likes that high pressing style. He likes that front foot, win the ball back, like we said, modern style football. And I wonder how he will adapt that at Man United, if he did come to Man United. Again, there's no guarantee at all that he will. It's just rumours at this stage. Whether he will look at the Premier League and whether he will be able to adapt. Because that's one thing that is worth pointing out. He's only ever managed in Germany. And the German league is not the Premier League.
No.
As any player that comes over from that league to play in the Premier League will say, the intensity is completely different. The levels are completely different. There isn't that same space. There isn't that same, being able to drop off against 7 or 8 teams in the league. You have to be on it for 90 minutes every single game. And sometimes if you want to be the most intense team in the league, you're now the most intense team in the most intense league. So your players have to be 60% fitter than they do if they're doing the same thing in the German league or whatever. And that might not be humanly possible for everyone. So do you narrow down the pool of potential players you have because they have to be absolute athletic freaks? Now they have to be an athletic freak and a world-class footballer. You sort of run out of options. And I think that was a problem that Ten Hag had a little bit, and Amorim even to a certain extent, is there aren't that many players that can get up and down the way you want them to and be good enough on the ball to win you with a league title. That would be one criticism, potential or question around him. Similar thing with Germany. He likes this sort of overloads, a lot of sort of central and kind of, verticality, getting the ball up the pitch quickly is what that means. Quick football, winning the ball back high up, all the stuff, all the key words we've been hearing for the last decade about Klopp and a lot of the other German managers, or Ralf Rangnick, who isn't German, I know, but players of that, managers of that kind of school. It's very much that sort of stuff. So if you like that, that's kind of what you're going to get with Julian Nagelsmann.
It just feels like, look, I know there's a few red flags there in terms of what those those systems and those tactics and those ideas have meant at Manchester United now they haven't worked. But the key here for me is you talked about adaptability, about how he's changed his system, he's changed his formation, he's used different players in different roles when he's got to a different team or where he's been at a different club, whatever. Working with different players, he's been able to do that. And as you mentioned there, that was what did for Amorim. And I think what did for Ralph Rangnick as well was, I think he was a little bit out of his depth. He hadn't managed much, had he, over the last decade. He'd been more of a sort of director of football role. And also, he inherited a group of players that had more or less down tools. Yeah. And the fact that he was only going to be here to end the season didn't help him, because they were like, listen to this guy, he's not even going to be here for much longer. And it was just a recipe for disaster. The club just got that completely wrong. The only sort of positive for me at the time seemed that they were going to have him involved in the first team, then he was going to move upstairs and work with the next manager. And Eric Ten Hag came in and went, I don't want out to do here. So they ended up having a handover over the phone, which doesn't even, it's meaningless.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So that was just you almost have to ignore a lot of that and some of the Amorim stuff, because like I said, if Amorim had tried his system and it hadn't worked and he'd have changed it, he might still been manager now. It was that stubbornness that did for him. And also some of the personality stuff where you could see he was struggling with the media, he was struggling with the press that used to eat out of his hand. He started going into press conferences and just having little mini meltdowns. How is Nagelsmann with the media? Because you've obviously talked about his tactics there, his achievements. It's a little bit difficult to fully pin down. As you said, how is he with the media? Because that is a big part of being Manchester United manager.
I mean, it is hard. And I think one of the things that, I don't think it cost him necessarily at Bayern, but I think it was that external pressure of Bayern Munich as an institution, which is a little bit bizarre anyway, as we know. I think the media and the pressure was a little bit, I don't want to say too much for him, because like I said, they had a 71% win rate. It hardly kind of caused the car to set on fire, but I do think that pressure kind of built up in the end. Now, on the other hand, there's a sort of few bits to go through. Like, he's someone that is very sure of himself, so he's not easily kind of pushed around. Like you said, that doesn't mean he's inflexible tactically, but I think he handles himself in a pretty confident and kind of straightforward way. He's someone that is up for talking about bigger picture things as well. When he's talking to the media, there's an example of him talking about a survey that was done in Germany asking about whether there should be more white people in the German national team. And
a ridiculous survey by any stretch of imagination for any country.
Exactly. And he rightly came out and said, this survey just in and of itself is racist. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we questioning the football in that way, using these parameters, etc.? So he's willing to sort of speak out, and he's not a cowering kind of small character that will just stick to his football and I'm staying in my lane. He's up for the challenge. So I do like that. But I think one thing with him, if we are to look at potential weaknesses, there is an element of he likes things his way. For example, like bringing in, I think it was at Bayern, bringing in a big screen on the training ground so that he could sort of pause sessions and almost do like live VAR. Here's what I didn't like. Here's what I did like about this, which again makes sense. But do big name, big ego players like being called out in real time in front of their colleagues, in front of the coaches, over and over again? You could easily imagine a situation where people go, it was brilliant, it completely changed the way we train. You could also imagine a podcast 10 years later where he's going, this bloody lunatic thought it'd be a good idea to take the piss out of us in front of training sessions, and we all thought he was a dickhead. So, do you know what I mean? You can imagine John Terry sat on a beanbag on some podcast somewhere saying how we knew he wouldn't last after he did that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet, it sounds like a good idea. So we'll have to see how that works with the players at his disposal. But he is a very sort of strong character, and I do think that United need that. I do think they do. I'm not saying he specifically is definitely the right guy, but I think of the options available that aren't Michael Carrick, or depending on what happens there, I think his CV is a good one. I think he's someone that's been successful everywhere he's been to different degrees. He's never done a Jose at Porto type success where it's just insane, but he's taken teams and he's done well with every single one he's been at, and that is a very good sign for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about him, and I think to go from sort of being a young manager at Hoffenheim facing relegation to be managing the German national side and you're still in your 30s cannot be ignored. He's not had an easy route. This isn't someone who was a German legend as a player and has just been given easy jobs or big jobs because of his reputation. He's had to work his way up, and he's done that. And there's a lot of differences between him and, say, Ruben Amorim, for example, not just flexibility. Ruben Amorim had never been at a club the size of Manchester United. Bayern Munich is a similar sized club, if not almost identical in the sort of the expectation, the stature. United probably a little bit bigger, but it's not
it's comparable.
Worlds apart, is it? It's very, very similar.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we all liked Louis van Gaal as a manager and his idea after David Moyes, he'd been at Barcelona, he'd been at Bayern Munich, he'd been at these big clubs, whereas David Moyes hadn't, and that sort of went against him. So Nagelsmann at least isn't going to come in and go, crikey, I didn't think my words would be, carry so much weight, or I didn't know I'd be under so much pressure, or the expectation, or whatever. He's used to it. He is used to that. And obviously, managing the German national team, the expectation there is, if you get to the quarterfinals of the Euros, no one's happy with that. You've got to improve. You've got to do better. So that impresses me. The fact that he has worked his way up impresses me. I just feel, for me personally, as you were talking then, as you're explaining this, there's too many unknowns for me. I feel like there's too many unknowns. I don't know what happened at Bayern Munich. I don't know how you gauge that. The 71% win rate is fantastic. Winning the Bundesliga is very good, but it's kind of expected. Yeah. And he did get sats, but it weren't really his fault. So what do you do with that one? Germany, what do you do? Yeah. And it's not his fault. He's going to do what his job is made to do. But so far, he's got Germany to the quarterfinals of Euros. Again, it's almost meaningless. Yeah. What he did at Hoffenheim was very good. There's probably 50 managers out there who've done something similar. Yeah. That's not enough for me. And I feel like this is a gamble. I feel like it is. I think the only way Nagelsmann is the Manchester United manager is if Michael Carrick has a bit of a stinker towards the end of the season and we end up either in the Europa or the Europa Conference, and the board is just going, look, you can't give a manager who's just lost 4 of the last 6 games the United job or whatever, and Luis Enrique isn't available, and maybe even Thomas Tuchel sticks to that contract he's just signed at the FA and isn't willing to break it, or the FA aren't, Man United aren't willing to pay the compensation, then you're probably looking at Nagelsmann. But other than that, I'm not too mad about him. What do you reckon?
I like him more than that. I think that I think he would be a fine fit at United. I'd if he was our next manager, I would be happy with that. Okay. I'm not saying that he would be my choice, but he's someone that ticks enough of the boxes to be hireable for me. And I think as well, I think what we mentioned at the start, the comparisons to Amorim, they aren't so strong that it's like hiring Amorim 2.0. I don't think that's the case at all. But what I do think is there is an element of consistency of vision there, which is I mentioned before. And I think that's really important, that we all want the idea in our head that Wilcox, Barada, Ineos to a lesser extent have a plan for Manchester United, and that it's not going to completely change and flip-flop based on what happened last season. You can't just go, well, we didn't like that, so let's do the opposite. Yeah. We didn't like that, let's do the opposite. You need to say, this is the best route for United to take back to success. We're going to build a squad within these wide parameters, and there are maybe half a dozen different types of manager that fit within the general tracks of what Man United are going to be. And I think he and Ruben Amorim fit within those same lines. They're not the same. They're quite different, in fact. But it makes sense to me. If we were then to go, and I don't know, let's not say Carrick because I don't know enough about him, but if we were to say, Ancelotti's next or Zidane's next, that would be such a wild pivot from who we've just had, similar to the sorts of pivots we did under Ed Woodward and the Glazers. I think that Amorim and Nagelsmann are different enough for it to feel fresh and have a better chance of succeeding, but are close enough that a squad built for one can help the other, and that we're not going to have to completely rip everything up that was happening 6 months ago just because it's scary because it didn't quite work. I think he would make sense along those lines. In a similar, I think Enrique would as well, and I think there are others that would. But I don't want to see United going for a completely different manager because that didn't work or wasn't quite successful. Now we have to completely rip everything up. I think play to the squad, the strengths of the squad, but the tenets and the traits that United should be going forward shouldn't change every 6 months or 10 months just because the manager didn't work out.
Yeah, I do hear you. I do. And I get your point as well. And let's be honest, there's no obvious, undeniable answer there.
No.
Enrique's probably the closest because of the fact he's won 2 trebles. Yeah. But even then this season, people are questioning him, aren't they?
Been poor.
Yeah, and it's like, is he sort of losing his mojo a little bit? So I do understand where you're coming from. I do, and we'll have to wait and see because I think right now, for me personally, me, I'm sort of old school, narrow-minded moron who's just like, I love Michael Carrick.
I like that description.
He's United legend and he's beat City and Arsenal. At the end of the season, if Michael Carrick hasn't got us Champions League football, we're going to be having a different conversation, and I'll be the first to admit that.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, I hope we have, and he gets the job, but he might not. So it was well worth looking at. I like what you went through there. Thanks for that. Pretty comprehensive, Joe. Get involved in the chat in the comments, man. Let us know what did you watch a lot of RB Leipzig when Nagelsmann was the manager? Did you watch anything of Hoffenheim? Did you watch a lot of him, a lot of the Bayern Munich team when he was in charge? Or have you been watching a lot of the German national side? I want to hear from you guys, because a lot of you guys watch far more European football, certainly than I do. So yeah, we can have those conversations, and I'll be interested to hear what you think about it. And we're going to do more on the managers that are being linked with the Manchester United job as it gets sort of towards the end of the season, and we'll see where we're up to with that. But really enjoyed that. Joe, big thank you as always. Go and check him out on the Sloppy Joe's podcast. You know where to find me. Don't forget as well, check out the merchandise. There's a link in the description for that. That's been Joe Smith. I've been Jay Motti. This has been a look at Julian Nagelsmann. Will he be the next Manchester United manager? Let's wait and see.